Good to go? Very good. I'd like to call this Monday, May 16, 2022 special called work session of the Henderson City County Planning Commission to order. I want to welcome everybody and thank everybody, especially I see members of leaders of local government, other community organizations, and special thanks to anybody here who has contributed to this project in any way. Madam Secretary, could you call the roll?
Sure. David Dixon.
Here.
Kevin Richard.
Here.
Bobby Jarrett.
Here.
Mac Arnold.
Here.
Dickie Johnson. Gary Gibson.
Here.
Kevin Herron.
Here.
Gray Hodge. Doug Bell. Stacy Denton.
Here.
Frank Boyette. XR Royster.
Here. We have quorum.
We do.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Bishop, would you like to do the introductions here?
Yes, sir. We had the presentation of the US 41 North Corridor Plan. That will be made by Ms. Maria Wainscott with TSW Design Group. So with that, I will turn it over.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Maria Wainscott. I'm with Taylor Swift Williams Design Group, and I'm here today with Ms. Amy Williams. She's unfortunately ill today, so she's joining us via Zoom. And we're just going to go over a draft of the US 41 Corridor Plan. So we'll start here, just giving a brief overview of what we'll be looking at today. So running through all the chapters, the introduction, existing conditions, our public engagement strategies, our goals, strategies, and recommendations, the implementation plan, and any questions or comments that you all may have. So looking at an overview of the table of contents, we kind of already touched on this, but it looks at what you're going to find in the document and how we're going to go through the story of US 41. So in terms of project understanding, the plan really includes a series of goals, strategies, and recommendations to form the future of what US 41 could look like. And it looks at it through three different lenses, including access and connections, sense of place and streetscape, and land use and development. And we'll go over what those things mean as we go on through the presentation. So in terms of the planning process, we started this process by looking at US 41 in its entirety, so the existing conditions, what influences US 41, and how it can change in the future. We followed that with some engagement opportunities with the steering committee and with the public, and we also had a series of focus group meetings to inform the plan. That helped us start to establish a vision for US 41 and then establish a series of draft recommendations for the corridor plan itself, followed by a draft of the plan. So in terms of how to use this plan, you'll see in the graphic to the right there, we'll start with the executive summary, followed by the introduction, the existing conditions, the public engagement section, goals, strategies, and recommendations, and the implementation section. So in terms of existing conditions, again, we really looked at the corridor through three different lenses, and that's the access and connections. So that looks at different transportation data that we have on the roadway facilities, traffic volumes, crash history, and vehicular and pedestrian connections. Sense of place and streetscape, which looks at different streetscape elements and points of interest along US 41, like John James Audubon State Park and Atkinson Park. And then land use and redevelopment, which looks at current land uses along US 41 and what could be there in the future. So in terms of collecting input for the project, we had two different steering committee meetings, as well as those two focus group meetings and two public meetings, this one included. And these engagement opportunities were really designed to engage community leaders, elected officials, local organizations, and the general public in order to determine your preferences for US 41 in the future. So looking at this, we kind of created a series of charts to determine what we heard in these steering committee meetings. One underneath the three lenses that we talked about, the access and connectivity, sense of place and streetscape, and land use and redevelopment. And what those looked at is the different aspects that go into each of those categories. So vehicular movement, what was important for vehicular movement for folks, and crosswalks and non-vehicular movement, And in terms of sense of place and streetscape, we looked at pedestrian amenities and streetscape plantings, wayfinding and signage elements. And then for land use and development, we looked at residential redevelopment and suburban redevelopment opportunities. This really helped us start to formulate strategies, and in terms of prioritization of those strategies, we had folks vote using dot stickers to tell us what they thought was most important in the plan, and that helped us with the implementation section of the plan, as well as streetscape improvement phasing, since it's recognized that not all of these improvements will be able to be implemented all at once due to funding restrictions. So in terms of what we heard from the public and what people's biggest concerns were, we heard a lot about pedestrian access and connectivity and safety. Right now, there's no sidewalks out there. So anybody who's walking along US 41 is, walking on the strip and right next to fast-moving vehicular traffic. So we wanted to look at some safety improvements. And some of the other things that we heard about were some opportunities for different types of pedestrian attractions that might occur along there, like pedestrian rest nodes or gathering spaces where people could come and enjoy US 41 as an attraction itself. We also heard about opportunities for redevelopment that might occur, whether that be multi-use housing opportunities or other kinds of different shopping opportunities like a Schnucks or a Target or anything that might kind of draw people back to the area and make it an attraction. So that led us to the formulation of our goals, strategies, and recommendations for this project. And our vision for this project was really to transform US 41 into a vital multimodal transportation corridor that reflects Henderson's character, attracts developers for adaptive reuse, and ultimately provides opportunities for public and private investment. And as we mentioned, that falls into those three lenses of access and connections, sense of place and streetscape, and land use and redevelopment. So the first goal that we're going to look at here is access and connections, which is really about establishing that accessible multimodal transportation opportunities. So in terms of that, we have 4 different strategies, the first of which is making US 41 more safe and livable for people who are walking along the roadway through those public streetscape improvements. And some of those recommendations that we're talking about are things like installing urban trail and sidewalks, installing a planting area, and upgrading those intersections. So making those safer for people who are walking, people who are biking, and bringing more awareness to the alternative modes of transportation. It also includes some aesthetic enhancements as well as what you can see in that plan view of the proposed intersection treatment, like specialty plantings at the intersection or street trees, anything to kind of make that experience of being a pedestrian or a bicyclist more comfortable and appealing. The second strategy really looks at right-sizing the road. And what we mean by right-sizing is making it appropriate for the uses that are occurring there. So with the I-69 project, which is anticipated to decrease those traffic levels on US 41, that really creates an opportunity to transform the roadway from a very car-centric roadway to something that incorporates other modes of transportation. So what that does is it takes the existing US 41 cross-section that you can see there, which is 6 lanes, and transforms it into a 4-lane with a raised median, maybe some plantings, and those urban trails on both sides of the road so people can walk and bike comfortably. So in terms of recommendations, we're looking at reducing those travel lanes, installing a center median, which may include low maintenance plantings, consolidating driveways. So what we're talking about there is when you're driving along US 41 and you see the multitude of fast food restaurants that each have their own driveway entrances. And that can create a lot of accident opportunities, that can create congestion and delays from people trying to turn left and play Frogger across the road, essentially. So we're looking at consolidating those driveways into a single driveway to help relieve congestion and reduce the number of crashes. Strategy 1.3 looks at wayfinding systems. And so that's really looking at directional signage, as well as signage like maps and interpretive signage, you'll see on the following page. So it creates a comprehensive wayfinding system for people who are driving, but also people who are walking. to help them understand and interpret the environment around them. So it helps to bring US 41 an identity and something that people will want to go see. So one of our recommendations will be installing the gateway signs, and that gateway sign that you see there for the city of Henderson in the lower left-hand corner. Installing district gateway signs, which are a smaller version and something that you'd use at major intersections. Installing pedestrian signs, which could be installed at pedestrian rest areas to help identify where you're at. And installing lighting and banners. Our fourth strategy looks at prioritizing connections for people who are walking and biking from these local destinations to surrounding neighborhoods. And so what we're talking about there is connections like Watson Lane and Marywood Drive, and providing sidewalks along those so that people can access those commercial interests along US 41. Also looking at providing things like stay and play packages and shuttles to and from partnering hotels along US 41 to help boost tourism, especially with Ellis Park right there. It's a great opportunity, and we heard from many folks that people don't know that it belongs in Henderson. We want people to know that Ellis Park is part of Henderson. And so this is something that we can do to help bring people to US 41. Our third recommendation would be providing an urban trail along Elm Street that connects John James Audubon State Park to US 41. And we heard that from a lot of folks. People want to see connectivity along Elm Street to the park in a way that's both efficient as well as an aesthetically pleasing experience. Also providing an urban trail to connect Elm Street to Atkinson Park. So Atkinson Park, we heard, is home to the Henderson Flash, the collegiate baseball team, and those games attract a lot of players from the area. They attract regional spectators, and having the pedestrian infrastructure elements along US 41 will help people connect to those food and retail and lodging opportunities. Our second goal, Sense of Place and Streetscape, really looks at celebrating US 41 as a gateway into Henderson by establishing a consistent visual corridor that responds to the conditions of Henderson. So the first strategy that we're going to be looking at is establishing a memorable brand that really capitalizes on the community's natural heritage and encourages people to explore. So what we heard is, Henderson is all about nature and the history of Henderson. So we want to look at establishing corridor branding and using that to help develop and manage a media campaign. And so we developed just one option, a corridor branding option for the district. To be, in this case, what we heard from people who voted at the public meeting was the Link District, and this isn't a final option, but it's just a general concept for what it could be, and then a potential branded website for what might incorporate that. So people who are looking to visit US 41 can learn what it's about, what kind of amenities in there and why they might want to visit. Our second strategy looks at developing a flexible streetscape that incorporates pedestrian amenities. And those amenities are really things like landscaping, benches, lighting, landscaping, and specialty paving that'll help support some mixed-use development opportunities. And so some of the recommendations that we're looking at there are creating pedestrian rest areas, and those rest areas will incorporate some of those amenities, encouraging private developers to establish semi-private areas. And what we're talking about there are small gathering spaces where things like farmers markets or small concerts or get-togethers could occur. And then installing streetscape improvements, and those are things like those benches, trash receptacles, bike racks, and hence plantings to help reinforce the US 41 brand. This is just one option, a pedestrian rest area that we had shown at the public meeting. This was what folks voted for, showing those different pedestrian amenities that might occur there. Our second strategy is looking at appropriate opportunities for public art that help speak to Henderson's cultural heritage and reinforce the character of the corridor. So one of the biggest public art opportunities that we know about here in Henderson is the Audubon Sculpture Tour. And so capitalizing on that, we want to look at some opportunities that might encourage public art. And so those might be things like percent for art policies that help fund public art. Other things like maybe opportunities for artists to come in and and donate art, and also installing art in the public right-of-way. So those are things that might occur in streetscape improvements throughout the gateway and throughout different intersections along US 41. And so that kind of art can incorporate a variety of different materials. It doesn't have to just be a static sculpture. It can be digital. It could be a painting, or it could be a mural on the side of the building. And just something to help encourage people to explore the corridor. Our third goal is land use and redevelopment, and what we're looking at there is really using these to help strengthen and bring reinvestment to the corridor to help support it economically. Our first strategy in terms of that is identifying areas where these high-density residential development opportunities can occur and these underutilized commercial pockets. And so what we're looking at in terms of some recommendations there are amending zoning in order to help support that. So amending zoning regulations to allow for the high-density residential development to occur. And then incentivizing redevelopment. And so whether that's through things like TIF districts or other opportunities to help bring in mixed-use developments that blend these residential, commercial, and cultural uses together in one space. So one of the things that we heard from the project steering committee was the desire for a redevelopment opportunity at the site of the existing Ramada Inn. And this was an example of a potential concept that could occur there for mixed-use development. Strategy 2 looks at establishing a US 41 business association to help to attract development opportunities and market the corridor to a larger region. And what a business association really does is help not only to promote those businesses, but also help give them the tools to education and training programs, as well as community involvement opportunities to help advance skill sets and their careers, which helps maximize corridor exposure and visibility. Strategy 3 looks at encouraging business diversity and a mix of tenants that matches the desired identity of the corridor and supports mixed-use development. And so what we're talking about there is attracting key businesses, and those types of key businesses that we're talking about are things like Schnucks, or things like Target, or things like TJ Maxx and Marshalls that people are looking for to help provide that foot traffic. We'd also be looking at evaluating incentives, so those incentives that might drive people to US 41, including things like partnerships with the Henderson Economic Development, the Henderson Chamber of Commerce, and the US 41 Business Association. Strategy 4 looks at creating a set of design guidelines and programs to help direct the aesthetic design of development. So we're not looking to, essentially force back creativity. We want to encourage the creativity, and we want these guidelines to be flexible so that people can come in and feel like they can create spaces that are respective of the building scale, placement, and orientation, as well as the facade appearance and signs along the corridor. So the thoughtful building design really helps to reinforce the sense of place of US 41. So recommendations for that are considering those design guidelines, as well as creating a facade improvement program that helps enhance those facades along the corridor and enhance the character of the corridor. Strategy 5 looks at incentivizing and retaining private investment through the development of a TIF district. And what a TIF district does is it allows the financing of public improvements and public subsidies for redevelopment. So it's used in areas where development could not occur without some sort of assistance. And Amy will talk a little bit more about that in the implementation section once we get to that. And so our recommendation will be creating a TIF district for this. So the implementation section, Amy, I believe you're leading off with this section.
Yeah, so I don't know, can everybody hear me? Decent enough? Okay.
Maria, I'm sorry, can you move the microphone closer to that?
Yeah. Does it?
Okay, can folks hear me now?
Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Yes, we can.
So sorry I could not be there. My kiddos passed the stomach bug off to me, so you don't want me to probably come and spread that with you guys this evening. So sorry about that. But was going to at least join in that we do have within our implementation plan, we've outlined and brought all those recommendations Maria kind of mentioned into one section, so they're easier to find, as well as those potential partners and any tools or resources that you might need for those or might want to look at for those. So each of those are kind of included in those tables that Maria's showing right now, and they've each been identified as low, medium, or high priority. So again, some things need to be done first versus just in a logical order, and then some things are just became more important as we talked with the public and the steering committee on this. Then if you kind of flip down to the funding section, so again, large infrastructure projects, that's always the biggest question is where's the money? How are we going to fund these things? Because it's great to think about them, but it's another to actually get them implemented. And so looking at a variety of different funding options, looking at some of the public and private partnership funding options that could exist out there. So it could be that you do modify your regulations, your land development code regulations in order to require some sidewalks and that kind of quote public realm right there to be built out by the developer as that does happen. That obviously is going to take a lot more time as parcels redevelop. Those don't redevelop as frequently, but that would be one option. So the city and the county could take kind of inside of the curb and the developer could take outside of the curb. Or we can look at doing really where the city and county can come in and start to phase in sections of these streetscape improvements in addition to those road improvements to help spur some of that redevelopment, especially in key areas. So TIF is one of those things that we did look at with the committee in the public meeting. Just again, not a new tax revenue, it's just reallocating tax revenues that would occur because of new development occurring. So that's one way to bond based on projected future revenues from TIF. So that would be one option that we did talk through as well. As looking at obviously the biggest bang for your buck, regardless if you use TIF or private or whatnot, it might be, we do want to look at those state and federal sources though, because those are our bigger dollars and we use those other sources as our local matches. So looking at some LPA funding is likely one of the most logical to start to look through there. It would need to get within the MPO's transportation improvement plans, so the TIP. And I think there's a lot of justification for this based on I-69 coming in and the whole, reason that we're doing this study is to making sure that this corridor doesn't become something that is older strip malls and doesn't quite have the redevelopment that maybe some areas might need. We did look at other funding sources again, and some of these are even in flux, as things start to move forward, but recreational trails program, you could call your urban trail, or your urban trail is a trail in theory, so we could look at some of those funding sources. The RAISE grants, it's probably not the most competitive for RAISE, but that's still an option out there. And then the infrastructure bill is always one that I still think is somewhat in flux, and we can see where that ends up at the end of the day as well. As looking at some of the states started to even make determinations on their rescue money as well in terms of being used for roadway projects. I know Indiana has recently looked at that. So just some options that we wanted to at least talk through. And again, I think the biggest and how you implement is what is the public role in that? Do you require the developer to build out your sidewalks, as part of a redevelopment plan? Or do you come in and try to phase it or do it in a little bit more of a coherent kind of stretch there? So we can talk through any questions you guys may have. I know you've been quiet so far. So I know that Brian had wanted, when we talked originally about this meeting, was to kind of sit down and talk through more of a working session kind of thing with you all, just to make sure you understood what was in the plan and make sure that, everything's clear and we don't need to go back and make any adjustments.
The commission have any questions or comments? Anyone in the audience like to address any portion of this?
I think, Mr. Chairman, should I step up?
Please.
Oh, this is I need to? state
You're
my name?
good.
Okay. I think this will be one of the most important considerations of city-county government probably in the next decade to 15 years, beyond I-69. I think the arrival of new industries, new jobs, projected growth, I believe, is going to put, I think, an even more important emphasis on the 41 Strip as a future living area, and also as continue to be our front door for our community in many ways. So I know, I hate to speak for the City Commission because members are here, but I know they're seriously beginning to consider this, and I would say as Planning Commission, developing a good partnership and kind of some common goals here and really diving into this in the next decade is going to make a huge difference in our community.
Thank you, Judge.
I got one thing I need to bring up. You know, really and truly, that highway is the busiest road we got in town. And it's still gonna be the busiest road in town after they get I-69 if they don't put a toll on the bridge. Now, if they put the toll on the bridge, old bridge, now that will mess everything up. But if they don't, that's still gonna be a busy highway in town. And you got a highway, you got 6 lanes down through there. Do you really want to situate it down unless it's really going to make a big change? Do you want to put sidewalk down the busy highway in town, or a bike path that close to the highway, unless they make some major changes? No, that you're going to have to. And also, if they do that, they're going to be major repair. And how much can them business out there take for how long? Can they be down without going under? I know they're talking 10 years from now and stuff like that, but that is a major highway. And I would, myself, no, I know they've done been already pre-planned, but that bicycle path and walking path right next to a major highway, and I don't see that could be more trouble than with the worse. There could be some changes, but not that major, because that highway's still gonna be a busy highway if they don't put toll on that bridge, because that would be a way that people from Henderson and Henderson County be going to Evansville. They won't be going across the toll bridge, and that they in the trucking outfit. But you still got to go to the docker, and that'd be the way they're going if they don't put toll on the bridge.
Well, you gotta think out the side of the box too, though, Gary. I mean, even if nothing changes, that area is stagnant if nothing gets developed out there. So even if that traffic never goes away, Henderson City County body, we need to come up with something creative where nobody's gonna develop this whole strip, so.
I think they do a pretty good job out there now. You got some places might be closed, but you got a whole lot of places that not, that see coming in, like a new car wash and all that. You still got business coming in out there, and how long they gonna be in the process of doing all this, and how that's gonna affect the people out there now.
If I could speak that a little bit. In the course of the advocacy work for I-69 and bringing that to fruition, just about everybody who looked at traffic studies understands that a large majority of the through traffic that comes through the Strip right now, and those are people that are simply traveling through our community to get from north to south or south to north, are going to move onto the I-69 bridge. In very few cases would you, Mr. Gibson, for instance, if you're driving down the interstate, think to get off a couple miles, go a path just to save a toll, as you can imagine. So the amount of heavy truck traffic and through traffic that is on the 41 Strip now will divert to I-69. And many of the folks who've been thinking about this for some time believe that'll drive the traffic on the Strip down to the point where it's light enough to have more infrastructure like sidewalks and bicycle paths, to lower the speed limits a bit, to where, since 90% of that traffic is local or just coming back and forth from Evansville, that even though it will be busy, it will be safer in many ways, and could probably handle walking paths and bike paths and things that can't exist there now for the reasons you expressed.
Well, I would go on by example with Louisville. Now, people will take I-64 bridge before they go to the new bridge.
But they're
So
not
they won't have
getting,
to
they're
pay
not getting
toll.
off an interstate.
And,
I think a great example in the Louisville area, though, is Dixie Highway. If you have ever been down Dixie Highway, it used to be a major road that went from Louisville to Fort Knox, Elizabethtown.
no,
kind of
I hadn't been
main
that way.
Has everybody been, seen Dixie Highway?
Judge, can I jump in for a second?
Sure.
What if we compared it to something a little smaller, if the speed limit was reduced a little bit, like a Green River Road in Evansville?
Yeah.
Because Green River Road has sidewalks on each side of it and has a large traffic count.
I was gonna use the example of Dixie Highway.
But they don't have
that's
no
it.
bath, but where you ride bicycle, and the walk path.
True, but they also have large sidewalks that are, and again, there's no perfect answer, but in my mind, that's kind of what I was thinking. You know, a large volume of traffic still, but you still have a lot of sidewalk and walkability. Just something to think about.
Well, we know it's gonna be a major change, coming, and, it's coming, and we all know it.
What are the actual numbers as in terms of current traffic counts, projected traffic counts?
I wish I had them off the top of my head, but I do know that about 45,000 cars a day cross the bridge. I would say anywhere from, just to guess, maybe 35–40% of that is through traffic. And much of that 35–40% is heavy trucks. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry.
They had also, during the EIS, they had projected, by 2045, the traffic would be 26,000 vehicles per day with the proposed, new bridge and tolling.
Diverting.
And it's currently about 36,000. If that helps you.
Projecting a droppage of a third.
A third less traffic on the strip.
Yeah, almost a third, yeah.
With that, I'll sit down. Sorry.
Probably no semis, no, large truck.
Right.
Delivery only, yeah.
Any other comments?
What would be the anticipated new speed limit through that area? Would it be like 45, 40, just to kind of give a visual of what, as people are going through there, comparing it to other areas?
Yeah, so the Dixie Highway, Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, is that 40 now?
I don't know. Currently I know that 41 is 45, 55 and when you go through kind of a more a detailed traffic analysis that would be needed, that's when you would really want to look at what those speeds would be based on some of the KYTC standards. But I would anticipate hopefully it being slower than it is currently, for sure.
It would be up to the state to set the speed limit, is that correct?
Amy, did you get that question?
No, I didn't hear that, sorry.
It would be up to the state. The state will determine what the speed limit is on 41 North, correct?
Correct, and yes, you would, again, kind of like what we're doing, even with this project, is kind of working with the state, and so it is a state road, so you're gonna have to follow their guidance at the end of the day, but hopefully being a partner at the table with them, in order
Any
to
of
make
these
some of
proposed,
those determinations.
any
So
of
they
the,
have to do a speed study.
excuse me, any of these proposed reduction in lanes, plantings in the middle of the road or along the side, that's all gonna be up to the state as well, correct?
Ultimately, it would be, yes. And we've met with them and coordinated with them a couple of times on this project. So I think that's a good plus that they've not said any of this is out of the question, which I think the cabinet's come to be much more supportive of these types of projects for the last 10 or 15 years for sure. So they've been able to see the success stories that they've done it in other districts and other places. So now, granted, the funding is where that comes into play, and then overall or long term, it's also maintenance of some of those facilities. If it's not just pavement, they'll maintain pavement, but the extras they don't necessarily maintain. so.
Well, and I guess where I was going earlier, if you do it correctly, you can have sidewalks with traffic. I mean, 60 over by Aqua City, that's a very high traffic area, but I don't feel in danger at all walking on that sidewalk. I mean, so if you do it right, you can account for the traffic. That's basically the comment I was making.
I agree, you get a little bit of that separation, and then you get some of the physical separation too with whether it's street trees or lighting, or, you know what I mean, those other kind of quote barriers that visually make you feel a little bit more separated too.
I think you touched on this briefly, but I might not have completely understood. Where in the study is a priority, step by step? Here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3, here's step 4, on down the list. Is there such a timeline recommendation?
So the implementation section where we kind of went over some of those different charts, and I can flip to those.
I'm having a lot of trouble reading what's presented on the screen.
Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit more. So this
Much
is
better.
one example, strategy 1.4. So it looks at the prioritization of the elements. So in this case, we rated strategy 1.4 based off of the public participation that we received as a high priority. So what it does is it ranks the strategy in terms of those priorities and then lists those recommendations as a following.
Are all the
So-
high priorities in one place?
So this is
Or are they
the,
scattered throughout?
so the strategy is actually ranked by the priority. So in this case, like strategy 1.1 we have as a medium priority. Strategy 1.2 is a low priority.
And the timing on those really depends on funding. You know, again, you can kind of sit and wait for development to happen with some of this, or you can come in and kind of phase in various sections. So it's really, the funding becomes the driving force on a lot of this too, in terms of what other funding sources can you find from, you know, KYTC or others, to help kind of make this happen a little faster. And again, sometimes you'll start in one phase and you won't realize, and then, you know, a different revenue stream might open up that you can kind of look at, to help phase in some of those sidewalk type improvements, so.
Close, next steps, a little bit closer to the fire. We've got how many people in this room? How does this study get sent out to? A lot more people than us. Do we have, are there copies of this thing in existence?
At this time, the only people who have copies of this are the people that were on the committee that met, the members of the planning commission, the members of the fiscal court, and the members of the board of commissioners. So I feel like the planning commission has completed its task of presenting the project. At this point, I feel like it's up to the board of commissioners and fiscal court to spread it forth if they choose to do so. From a staff standpoint, that's our opinion.
In what form does it exist?
Currently in this form, or at this current time, it only exists in a digital form. There are not hard copies that have been presented to the public. That can be done. It can be emailed via a Dropbox link like we gave it to you folks, but it's certainly reproducible.
Am I the only guy that likes hard copy? I got my red pen, oh, it's black, but, you know. We'll mark it up.
We, Mr. Chairman, we chose not to present it or to print copies at 160 pages unless someone specifically requested it.
Understood.
So,
Understood.
but yes, that can be done if you.
Can this electronic version be posted on the planning commission website, or is it
Certainly.
already there?
It is not yet. We did not want it public until it had been presented to all the bodies involved.
Okay. You know, several government entities are mentioned as partners and stakeholders, several community organizations like the Chamber and Economic Development. I would hope that they would do all they could to pass this around too. There's a lot to chew on here, a lot of ideas, and to get any of it done, we're gonna have a lot of involvement.
Has there been any, are all the, I guess you say, the commercial properties out there, have they all been exposed to what the ideas we're talking about? And
They-
get their input as far, do they say, hey, I'm all for it, let's go, or are they, you know, this is one I want to fool with or something, or?
Yes, a number of them were included in the invites. They were public notices, so everyone in the public was allowed to come. We also personally invited various stakeholders, like for example, the folks that own Fire Dome, the folks that own Subways, I believe Henderson Chevy, those type of folks were all notified and able to come participate.
Some of them show at some of the planning
Mhm.
meetings. David and I sat on it
Mhm.
for the planning commission, I mean, and I didn't get to attend all of them. Unfortunately, I had some issues that kept me out of town for 5 months, but there was individuals, property owners, commercial developers that was at some of the early meetings. I didn't get to attend the latter ones, so I couldn't answer that. But yes, Brian, telling the truth, there was several that showed up.
Mhm.
Now, I can't tell you where they're at now. And this is a big jump for a small community like Henderson County.
It is, but to answer Mac's question, I feel like there was ample opportunity for involvement.
Yes. I'm all about aesthetics, and I think aesthetics is a driving force in development. So, and funding is the next question. I know that we talked about this before, is, you know, it's pretty drawing a picture or taking a picture of, you know, a grassed berm with trees on it, but somebody's gotta maintain that. Now, I understand if I heard her correct, you know, the maintenance of this is gonna fall back on the city and county. Am I correct?
That's typically how they would require it. KYTC would typically require an MOU between the city and our county and KYTC to maintain it.
Okay.
Very good. Any other comments, questions, observations, suggestions? I want to thank everybody again for being here. I want to thank the consultants for the hard work they've put in here and the quite a vision of the future, or one vision of one future. I don't want to keep everybody beyond their what time they have. Any other comments or questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. We stand adjourned. Thank you all.